Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Devotions. Pastor Steve here walking with you in God's Word. We're in Exodus chapter 21. And as we have Exodus 20 of the 10 Commandments and God shaping his community, putting before them blessings and the laws and the statutes to have that relationship with him, but also have that relationship with one another. He continues to go on in Exodus 21. And as we walk in Exodus 21, we get the detail of the community, of what's set before them, of certain regulations, certain consequences. As God is shaping community, he puts things in place for their benefit, of their relationship with him, but also their relationship with one another. Especially as we're going to be encountered here in chapter 21, we get to see the regulations and the consequences of how a master will actually be the boss, or frankly be the head of the servant or the slave, as you get to see here. When we come to these scriptures, a lot of times we come to it with our own bias and context, and so we need to be careful of what we're laying upon the text. Slavery back in the Hebrew time wasn't slavery of what we think about a lot of times of what the travesty was just years ago in the United States of America. Slavery back then was a servanthood. It was a way of life as well. And you'll get to see that in Exodus 21 here, to be able to see the years of service, or if it is liking to serve the master, that could just continue to go on. However, there is consequences to a master being authoritative over his servant or slave, and we'll pick that up as well. Consequences, responsibilities inside the community that God has established around his relationship with his people and their relationship with one another. Exodus chapter 21. Let's read together. These are the laws you are to put before them. This is from God speaking to Moses. And so, if you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he shall go free, without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children and do not want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. He is in the household of the master. The master has shown him provision. The master has actually given him of his household, and the servant, the slave, wants to be a part of that household, that family. And so he puts that all in his ear to be able to signify, this is someone in my family, of my possession, but also in amongst my provision. Verse 7 says, if a man sells his daughter as a servant, she's not to go free as men servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, she is to go free without any payment of money. Responsibility of a master over a daughter. And that's the title that really needs to be brought forth, of how do we treat these young women in and amongst the community as daughters, and they have rights, right? Food, clothing, marital rights, being able to say that master, just like the master of the servant, is to be that provision for that daughter. It goes on, further laws. Verse 12, anyone who strikes a man and kills him shall surely be put to death. However, if he does not do it intentionally, but God lets it happen, he is to flee to a place I will designate, a refuge place, because the community will kind of surround that and being able to judge that rather than what God has judged it. If it was an accident, it's not meant for him to be able to take life, but life for life. If a man schemes and kills another man deliberately, take him away from my altar and put him to death. There is no mercy for that. Deliberately murder. You shall not murder. He said that in that earlier chapter. Anyone who attacks his father or his mother must be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps another and either sells him or still has him when he is caught must be put to death. Anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. If men quarrel and one hits the other with a stone or with his fist and he does not die but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be responsible if the other gets up and walks around outside with his staff. However, he must pay the injured man for the loss of his time and see that he is completely healed. Responsibility. If a man beats his male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies as a direct result, he must be punished. But he's not to be punished if the slave gets up after a day or two, since the slave is his property. If men who are fighting hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is a serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. If a man hits a manservant or maidservant in the eye and destroys it, he must let the servant go free to compensate for the eye. And if he knocks out the tooth of a manservant or maidservant, he must let the servant go free to compensate for the tooth. If a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull must be stoned to death, and its meat not to be eaten. But the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up and it kills a man or woman, the bull must be stoned, and the owner also must be put to death. However, if payment is demanded of him, he may redeem his life by paying whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull must be stoned. The 30 shekels is, of silver is that payment of a slave. If a man uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it and an ox or donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must pay for the loss. He must pay its owner, and the dead animal will be his. If a man's bull injures the bull of another, and if it dies, they are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay animal for animal, and the dead animal will be his. There's some uniqueness to the scriptures. But this whole chapter is forming and shaping this community to be a community of responsibility, a community of togetherness. That I will take responsibility for my property, my possessions, or even amongst my bull. We need to take responsibility for our actions, our livelihoods towards others. And as God shapes and forms this in Israel, he's going to be pretty deliberate and detailed as we continue to go on in these next chapters. But it's for the purpose of being able to put that foundation for people that their relationship with God is going to be one of blessing and of sacrifice and of worship. But their blessing of others is going to be responsibility and consequences enacted so that they actually care for the person next to them. Care for the possessions of the person next to them so that they can be a community together, living together, working together for the very benefit of one another. So it's not too far-fetched. It's not too unique as what we get to have here in Exodus 21. God has shaped and formed his community, the church, to care for the people around them. To make sure that we take on responsibilities and not become victims, but rather being able to be responsible and caring for that person next to us. God's forming and shaping that in Israel, and he has definitely formed and shaped that for you and me as the church. So a great question that we have today is, how am I caring? How am I involved? How am I living with that person next to me, that neighbor, making sure that it goes well with them? My responsibility is to live a decent and faithful life, yes, but also have that impact of how do I care for the person next to me. As you do that, God bless you and have a blessed day.